going to talk about once you get your new ride, your new project, whatever. If you drug it out of a field or a barn or something, chances are it doesn't run. So we first want to make sure it runs before we go putting a bunch of money into fixing it up and kind of making it our own. How we're going to do that, we got to just see it fire. Whether it's fires up and runs, you know, if it's been sitting a whole long time, that might not be the case. But you got to at least hear it fire to know that it's not seized up and whatever. So usually what we do, start with the freshly charged battery. Make sure your terminals are pretty clean on the battery and your connections are good. The wires don't look all busted apart or whatever. So you got a good charged up battery. Yours may have come with the key, it may have not. If you have the key, start there. This bike, the guy jumpered the starter coil manually to start the bike. So I knew it ran because I heard it run, and it idled for a while, so I knew I was okay there. But if I had just got it out of a garage or something where it had been there for 20 years, there's no way to do that, so you're just kind of taking a chance. But start with fresh battery, put your key in, make sure you're not just trying to crank and start the bike without the run or start-stop switch turned on. I've done that too. On this bike in particular, after I tore it all apart, I tore out all the broken things, whatever, and then put the battery back in, got the ignition switch all plugged in and wired up because it was, you know, they didn't have the key. So once I got to that point, I tried to start it. The sucker wouldn't crank. It would just dim the headlight a little bit. And then I checked this, took that all apart because sometimes those are known to go bad, the connections inside these switches. And that's on a lot of bikes, not just Hondas or whatever. And then the start switch, thought maybe that was the problem because whenever I clicked the start switch, I could see the headlight dim, so there was a draw somewhere, but it just wasn't turning the motor. So I went around and around looking at schematics of wiring online and all the things, and then finally I got to looking at where these side covers were. It's a three-piece deal, one here, one across the front, one here, and that sucker's floppy. Well, in looking in there, I could see that there's this little like module hanging down in there that's plugged in, and it used to be attached to this side cover, but it had been broken off. That is the bank angle sensor is what they call that. And a lot of bikes have them. Goldwings have them too, but I think they're up in the front of the fairing. But basically it's a little, I guess, weight of some sort on a pendulum that senses that the bike is tipped over and won't allow it to start or will turn it off. So in this case, I got lucky and figured out after spending hours looking at all the wiring and seeing if there was something else that had been clipped. Was it the clutch switch that's, you know, in here? I jumpered that guy to see if maybe he was the culprit. It wasn't it, man. I wasn't getting any signal back to this starter relay. And come to find out, it was because this tip over sensor or bank angle sensor was just laid in there on its side. So I zip tied it up straight to this backbone-ish area of the bike, and now she fires up. So, and that's assuming that your bike is getting fuel, that assumes that your bike's getting spark. So these are things you're gonna have to look at. So first start off with fresh battery, make sure your wires are good and not all corroded and gnarly. You don't have any what look to be cut wires. See if you can get it to crank. If you can get it to spin over, okay, you're headed in the right direction. Next, what I'd probably do is pull out a spark plug wire and spark plug. So if you've got it cranking over, if you take that plug, after you've taken the spark plug out, plug it into the wire, ground it out against the metal while you're cranking it, and see if you got spark. If it sparks, cool. Now all you gotta do is put that back in there, and hopefully now all you need is some fuel to get it going again. Which, I mean, obviously you wanna start with gas in the tank. Some people would just try to start it with no fuel in the tank. I may have done that. Put some gas in the tank, check the petcock if it's like a carbureted bike or whatever. Make sure when you turn it on and off, the fuel is flowing out the end of the petcock, and plug it back into the carburetors or fuel injectors or whatever. And you should be getting fuel to those. If it's a fuel injected bike, you might need to do a little bit more research. When you cycle the key in the start-stop switch, you probably should be hearing the fuel pump priming. If not, you might need to get you a little voltmeter find the fuel pump and have somebody cycle that key situation while you check its input to make sure that it's getting juice, because it could be that your fuel pump froze up from sitting so long and being gummed up. So you may need a fuel pump. If it's a carbureted bike, you don't normally have to do that. Some carbureted bikes do have a fuel pump, so that could be a thing too. But if you can hear the fuel pump running, you got fuel in the tank, chances are you got fuel in the carburetors or EFI or whatever you got going on. Give it a crank, see if it fires up. If that's not an option, or like in this case, I got the tank off, you could use a little starting fluid and manually put some fuel into the carburetors. Then try to start it to see if she runs. And at that point, you'll know that, hey, at least this thing turns on. You still don't know if it overheats, you don't know that it runs right, but it does run. So then I'd say you're probably safe to move forward in fixing it up. Maybe you got to pull the carbs off and clean them or rebuild them or whatever. But before doing all that, at least you know, hey, it did turn over, it fired, it ran. So you've got spark, you've got compression, and you've got fuel, whether you entered that manually or not. But at least you'll know at that point, hey, this thing does at least run, and I can continue on with whatever it is I'm going to be doing to this thing. So that's usually where I start with that. Sometimes you'll have to, like I said, work into these switches or wiring, depending on the condition. A lot of times when you pick up an old project bike from somebody, man, they may have already went to town working on it, and I don't know why people choose wiring first, but it seems to be that sometimes it's that way. But yeah, so don't forget your clutch switch. You could jumper that guy to test if that's the culprit. And in this case, I needed an ignition relay because somebody had melted it with all their jimmy-jacked wiring. But yeah, I mean, hopefully that helps you in kind of getting your new project into a spot where you feel confident that it's worth fixing up and you know that the motor works. Hopefully this video will help you a little bit. If you could subscribe to the channel, we sure would appreciate it. If this video you found helpful, give us a like. If you thought it sucked, give us a dislike. Let us know in the comments, do you have any tips or tricks or anything that maybe when you pull an old bike out of somewhere, what are some things that you look at first or what you go through? I mean, I'm always looking to learn how anybody else does it. All right, guys, thanks for coming. Peace out.